Today's episode does contain a brief conversation surrounding the attempted Trump assassination in July of 2024 in Butler County, PA. Listener discretion is advised. Something that we did sort of start talking about, and I as I'm getting into this new year and shifting into some deeper topics, is talking about politics, right? We had a little bit of a conversation yesterday about it. It does come up here a little bit in your book. And you mentioned that you were at the Trump rally. So I kind of want to just start there, if that's okay. If you're comfortable sharing your perspective, and the perspective I would really love to hear from you for people to hear is that you were there and you experienced it, and then what you saw that came out in the media afterwards.
Okay.
Hi, welcome back. Another episode here in 2025, Alter Eagle. I am your host, Laura Crago. Thank you so much for listening. I struggled with dropping today's episode, which was why I dropped it late. I was feeling a little nervous. We do get into the topic of politics and religion. And I've started to have these conversations out and about in the community. And I have come across a few people who have told me to, I don't know if I want to say verbatim what they said, but it made me a little anxious and a little nervous. Didn't really sleep too well last night. We are our own worst enemies, right? And so I just wanted to say I appreciate all of you who do listen to the podcast. And the whole purpose of starting this conversation is because I just find it to be very necessary. I think if we're going to get anywhere in closing the gap with the divide, not only in our county, but in our country, it starts with conversations. And a lot of these conversations are going to be hard. They're not going to be what you want to hear. Nothing is meant to try to sway anyone's opinion. I'm not trying to change your opinion necessarily. I think I'm trying to broaden our perspectives from both sides. You know, there's a lot of gray area that we don't talk about, and the people that are in that gray area are the people that I want to talk to. I want them to feel comfortable. And I have had a few people just say, you know, I can't, whether it's for, you know, their job, they're not able to have those conversations. And that's a little discouraging to me as well. You know, here at the Butler Eagle, the newsroom, because they're journalists and because of what they do, they're not allowed to report in that way because they do have to keep it in the middle. And for me, being completely separate from the newsroom and having talked to Tammy about this and saying, okay, like, you're totally okay with me coming out and saying what I need to say and what I feel and where I'm at. And she said, absolutely. So I'm just going to go ahead and let us get into this episode today. Again, this is just one conversation between Cecilia and I. All of the conversations that her and I had leading up to this were all completely different, but we heard each other, right? We saw each other's perspectives, even though there were times where we didn't agree. It's being able to have the conversation. It's trying to understand where someone is coming from. I do have very strong opinions on a lot of things, but what I'm trying to do is to open myself up to hearing what other people have to say, but also speaking my truth. So, part 2, episode 47. I hope you enjoy it. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling, like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alter eagle. That's better, HELP, betterhelp.com/alter eagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel.
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself a political advocate at all. The motivation for me going was primarily that I was curious about him enough to want to see him personally. I'd read his autobiography and I read Kamala's. I read several. And that my younger son had broken his arm and he was so bored. And he's like, Mom, this is this huge famous guy and he's just, 2 miles away. Let's go. And so I said, yeah, let's go. So he and I went. And I will tell you that it was 90 degrees in the shade. There wasn't any shade. It was so hot, and we had to wait for a good 5 hours, and then he was late an hour. And so to get 6 minutes felt like, wow, we spent a lot of time preparing for something that got cut so short, so dramatically. I will say that that the two impressions I had right when the shooting happened. Well, before the shooting, I want to mention that I actually said to my son, look at these snipers on the roof. No one's going to mess with anything today. And also knowing that, Butler's a conservative town, I was like, no one's going to mess. You always think these things happen in major cities and bigger places. I did not think it would happen here. I kind of marveled that Butler was even part of his, his tour. And I remember in 2016, we were the last stop on his tour. And I had actually researched, why is Butler significant that he would want to stop here twice? Why is that? And so I was very fascinated that he would come back and go to a place like the Farm Show, which is really dear to our hearts. We go every year to the Farm Show. It's like we can't leave town on that week. So we love the Farm Show. So here he was in a familiar place. It just felt wrong to not go and check it out. I would honestly say if Biden had come to the Farm Show, I would have gone there. I think any major political figure that comes that close to home, whether you like them or hate them, why not see for yourself what they have to say and what their demeanor's like? And so I was really glad that we sat there through all that heat. And in hindsight, I was really glad because it was kind of the JFK, where were you when JFK got shot? That moment to know that we were actually there when it happened, as opposed to hearing whatever the news spun it as. What you're referring to is that when I was sitting just a few yards from the media, they were to my left. And I don't know exactly what news stations were all there, but there was at least 30. So I'm sure that all the major ones were there. And after I got home, I started looking through my phone, and for the next 10 hours, I will say all but one network reported something, I don't have it on me right now, but something like loud noises disrupt Trump rally, or Secret Service escorts Trump off. None of them said an assassination attempt was made on the former president.
They didn't just say it how it was. They didn't just say, this is what happened.
But for everyone that was within, vision of the jumbotrons or of himself, there was no dispute about what had just happened. So I was really shocked, because you've heard fake news for the last 4 years, to realize that that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Why do you think they did that? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? It's they were there. They were standing there. I mean, we even reported on it, and we reported attempted assassinate. It was,
yeah.
Right now, as I'm sitting here, I'm kicking myself for not having that headline, because I knew we were going to have this conversation. But
yeah, I would only say the why is because it is very glamorous in an ugly way for someone like him to take a bullet or to be shot at. Yeah. It's, and so I don't think they wanted that to come out, but the ignorance was realizing that there was, 28,000 cell phones there taking pictures that day of that event. Probably it would come out.
And someone died. Someone lost their life.
And we didn't know that till the next day. I think had the crowd realized that someone had actually died other than the shooter. We started to move when the ripple came through that said shooter down, and then it was like, okay, the shooter's down, and then Trump raised his fist. And so we were like, okay, that was it. Everything's okay. As I was walking out, I passed someone that I knew who had been sitting right by, and they said the person behind him got shot. I don't think that was Corey. I think it was one of the other two gentlemen. But he was very shaken. And that's when I was like, wow, people are injured. But we did not know till the next day that someone actually died.
And it's really just because of your perspective where you were in correlation to all of those other people. Because I know people that were closer to him. And I do know from some of the gentlemen that were there, that were in the front row, some different senators and people had said that having had been in military and knowing that sound. Yeah. A lot of people say whenever there's gunfire, people who haven't been out in public and heard that it sounds like firecrackers or something popping off, or our brains, and maybe it's this fight or flight thing that happens in our bodies, in our brains, protecting us, thinking that's not what,
Right.
it's not that, it's something else, because you hear that a lot I mean, I was just listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about a shooting, and immediately the man said, I heard these popping sounds and I thought that it was coming from a distance, and here it was like right in front of him that it was happening, because it was happening so quickly. You know, when someone's using an automatic rifle, that happens fairly quickly, and especially in a distance like that, in an area like that. So, well, I just want to say, like, well, thanks for talking about that, bringing that up. Something that I had said to you yesterday, and you gave me an interesting perspective, and even if we don't agree on it, right? And that's kind of why I want to have these conversations, and I want to let my audience know that I'm not here to change anyone's minds. I'm not here to debate with anyone. I think part of what's happening, not only in our country, but in our county, the divide that's happening is because we probably don't feel as if we can say how we feel or what we believe for fear of retaliation or fear of even danger. You know, a lot of people feel, I didn't feel comfortable putting a Harris sticker on my car. I don't have a yard, but I didn't feel comfortable even putting one on my front porch. I don't know exactly if I can say exactly why. It's not that I thought that something specific would happen. I just didn't feel safe doing that. Yeah. I felt as if, you know, there's enough struggle in life, right? Things come to you. I saw an interesting video yesterday of a rabbi on a podcast, and he was talking about how there are, let me think about this for just a moment. His perspective was very interesting because it's basically determining at the beginning of the day how you're going to go forward in that day. So when you walk into a room, there are certain people who will shift based off of what's happening in the room, the energy in the room, or it could solely be someone coming up to you and saying something that's negative, and then you immediately feed into that negativity and it brings you down. Mm-hmm. So it's something about being a receiver, like a receiver or a transponder or something like that. He said, so you have more power than you realize. Like at the beginning of your day, if you wake up and you say, I'm going to go through this day with joy and gratitude. And I very much get that from you, that you live with like gratitude and joy because you consistently practice that daily. And that's what when you're in front of a congregation, that's what you're doing. I think that's why your eyes smile, because you are living, you are writing the check and cashing the check. That's a
funny way to say it, but yeah, I would say,
I mean,
say that my foundation is very secure in terms of my faith and my values. And I don't know if this is what the rabbi was referring to, but I would say there's days where my attitude is bad and I probably affect people around me negatively. I try not to. And I also have realized that I can get offended easily, and that is my own fault. Like I need to be thicker skinned. I've been praying for that for a long time, and just not I think the degree to which you get offended easily is also a reflection of how mature or immature you are. So I really try to grow in that area and not be ruffled by other people as much. But I am a people pleaser, and I wish I was just a God pleaser. But when you have that component that you want to make everyone happy, it's easy to get ruffled when someone is unhappy with you. But I think people, when you first brought that up, I thought you were talking about actually shifting their worldview based on what's around them, and that to me is fundamentally one of the problems in this last several years, is that people can be influenced so much by what's being said to them or spoken to them, or just in the echo chamber, lifted out quotes, misconstrued things. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be a hater, and I certainly am sad that you felt threatened at all to put a sticker. But I think there's haters on both sides, but no one wants that. And this is kind of a tangent, but back in 2020, I actually signed up to be a enumerator for the census in Butler. Oh. And I did it honestly because we don't go door to door anymore. We don't have that welcome. Mm. And it's very hard to meet your neighbors and meet strangers. And I just felt really like the voice of the Lord said to me, if anyone's going to go door to door, you should be one of them. So I signed up and I went out, and by and large, I probably spoke to 300 people, and maybe 2 of them were ugly to me. People were really great. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing for me. And I say to people, when people are downing kind of the culture now and everyone's so negative and hateful, and I'm like, you know what? People genuinely face to face are great. It's people through the media, people harassing each other through Facebook. That's when it's not great.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. My point of bringing up the rally and wanting to say to you something that I had seen on the news that we talked about yesterday was a news station that was interviewing someone leaving the rally in their car, and the passenger rolled her window down and leaned out the window, and her statement was, and not verbatim, but essentially she said, I'm just so shocked that something like this, similar to what you said, could happen in our town. My brain, from my experience and what I believe and how I voted, immediately went to gun control. Immediately. I immediately went to where that statement by that person sort of fired me up in a way where I was like, are you not paying attention? Like, this happens all the time. Mental health, someone who has an automatic weapon who, frankly, personally, and this is, I'm saying this out loud, and I'm a little nervous about saying it right on this platform because I am not saying this to sway anyone's opinion on what they believe. I'm trying to understand why we find it necessary for common civilians to own automatic weapons. I've spoken to military people who have served in Afghanistan, gun specialists, who are very far right in their beliefs and how they vote. And they're set in that for a lot of reasons. But these are people who have a wild, vast understanding of these weapons, who don't understand why common civilians have automatic weapons. I'm not saying that's the solution to get rid of them. That is not what I'm saying. So I just want to be clear. But what was interesting to me, and this is why I want to have this conversation, is I want to be able to hear a different perspective on that experience. And that's what you gave me. So what fired me up was that she said that. And to me, I thought, well, how ignorant. There's gun violence every day. I mean, I spoke to someone who knows people who lost children in Sandy Hook, and there are people in this world who say that that didn't happen. And that just breaks her. She's like, that breaks me because I know someone who lost their child, and there are people who think that that was a hoax, that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because why? So it's, to your point, there's a lot of fake news out there, and if someone sees something online, they believe it to be truth, and I'm like, you can't believe everything you see online. Mm-hmm. You just can't. And I think that's where the fear is invoked with me not wanting to put a sticker on my car. I think it was more primarily, not that I thought anyone was going to blow up my car, nothing like to that tune, but it was almost the avoiding of someone flipping me off, someone, trying to run me off the road or anything like that, because road rage is a thing, and it can just take the littlest teeny tiny thing. And I thought, what if I happen to just be driving too slow or whatever, and it just annoys someone, and then they see that sticker? I don't know. I don't know where that's coming from. I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to avoid it.
I'm no expert on the gun debate.
Yeah.
But I think what I said to you yesterday had to do with the fact that I grew up near D.C., and my parents weren't gun owners. We didn't ever see a gun other than in the military or the police force. And even then, I'd never seen actually a machine gun until I got off the plane in India one time, and they were all these people with machine guns in the airport, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
But when I lived in Nashville, I discovered that a lot of really good people in the church, people who I admire and respect, they were all packing guns. Mm-hmm. And I started asking, why would you do this? And they're like, well, we firmly believe as citizens that if there's a need to rescue, help, respond, we want to be equipped and ready. And I was like, wow. I knew that I couldn't do that because I'd probably shoot myself. But I also know that's true here in Butler. There's a lot of good people I know, and I'm glad for the sake of our, I guess what I said before too is, if we had a president who was really, really trying to take away all the guns from all the good guys, that would speak to me that they probably were someone who might want to come in with the military and force us as a dictator would. But if we have a president who's like, I believe that you have the right to have a gun, it does it does check and balance the government authority to know that if they tried to come in and impose something like a Nazism, people are going to stand up with their guns and they're going to fight back. So to me, it's a check and balance for the system that I think needs to stay in place within good and sensible guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree with you about, machine guns and private homes. I think there's a point at which it doesn't make sense. You don't need rapid fire like that. But I am not a gun owner. I'm not a gun user.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak to the gun debate in that way.
Yeah. But the I think the other thing that you said, the perspective, if you remember, was my reaction to that woman saying, I can't believe this happened here. How could this happen? You were there and you experienced it. And a lot of people afterwards said, well, I think she was probably referring to an attempted assassination in our town, that we're such a small town. And how could that happen here? And maybe it was because she thought everyone that was here in support of him. A lot of people made that assumption. And I met a lot of people who went for the same reason you went, because they were curious and they thought, this is a moment in history and this is in my town and I want to go to that. And I have a lot of respect for that. And I'm actually, I'll be honest, I'm glad I wasn't there because I was invited to go and I know where they were standing and where they were sitting. And I think it probably would have really traumatized me. Obviously grateful that everyone is safe that I knew that was there. But you made an interesting point because you said that's not necessarily what she meant. That's probably not what she meant, because for you, having been there and experienced it, it was almost as if, how could I be experiencing something like this? Like, you said people say where they were when they found out Kennedy was shot. And when he died, I mean, my mom remembers where she was and how devastated she was. Because that man, I think, was bringing a lot of hope to a lot of people, and he was young, and I think there was sort of this vibrancy to him. There was a lot of controversy behind him as well, obviously. Did you
know that JFK was here in Butler in 1960?
I don't think I did know that.
I looked it up, and you can read his speech, October or something, 1960. He was on the courthouse steps, and it was before he got elected in November that year. Isn't that fascinating?
Isn't that interesting?
And he got shot. And there's another president, became a president that got shot in Butler County, which was George Washington. I think it's very fascinating that
I'm the type of person that whenever you tell me something like that, and I'm probably going to go down a rabbit hole now, and
you can read my next book. I'm gonna weave that one in.
Okay. But you just gave me a really great perspective on how, it is not my place to take away people's experiences who were there, right? Not what I'm trying to do at all. I know a lot of people who I love. I have people on both sides, very far right, very far left. And I have a lot of people on both sides who have a hard time with the fact that I have friends or family that are this way or that way.
Well, I really respect what you're doing, and I respect that you do, because I think that shows an honesty and a desire to deal with reality instead of buttoning yourself up in one compartment. I would say that because of my work with the church and being homeschooled, I'm kind of in a little bubble, but I try when I can to make friends outside of that. You've seen me do improv and things. I want to make friends on both parties, because I think I certainly don't want everyone to think what I think. That would make the world a very boring place. But I do want people to be transparent and to be truth seekers, as I mentioned. That's really what I pray for, especially in this era where the media is questionable about their intent. Like, be transparent, speak the truth, and be truth seekers. And if you read something that seems like, wow, that is pretty sensational, crazy, then see if you can find out whether or not that's really the truth. I actually just found an app that I can pitch right now. It's called All Sides. It's a great phone app because it has this blue, this red, and this purple, and it will show you like the headline and kind of sum it up. And then it'll show you the articles it took it from and kind of give you a guide there's more than one like that. But I was like, that's what I'm going to look at from now on before I read other headlines, is to get all sides.
Thank you for telling me that, because I'm looking for some resources like that with this. Again, I don't want to make anyone feel like they have to have this conversation, but it's really important for us to be able to sit down. It's important to me to be able to sit across from someone who is as open-minded as you are, right? But also you said something that Mike Kelly said to me once. It's like, just do your research on the candidate. do your research, find out more about them. And the fact that you've read their autobiographies, it actually, last night I thought, okay, I need to get Harris's, I need to get Trump's, I really want to read Michelle Obama's. There's a lot of, and I need to do that because it's important to me to understand where everyone's coming from. And I know that I'm going to face a lot of backlash from that. It's not that I don't stand in my truth. I know what my truth is, and I've said it to a lot of people. I will say right now, like, I did vote for Harris. When I woke up the next day, because I fell asleep trying to stay awake for the election results, I put my computer next to my bed and had it on and fell asleep. And I think I woke up in the middle of the night and just closed my computer. And when I woke up in the morning and I saw that he had won, I was a little sad for different reasons, right? I have people in my life who it's not for me to take their experiences and their feelings and their beliefs away from them, who are a little they're at the end of this life, okay? When I go to heaven, I'm pretty certain God's not going to be checking my bank account or my 401k. He's going to be checking something else. And this past year, when you said truth seeker, people always ask at the beginning of the year, like, I was thinking of words that I want to sort of live by this year. Because last year was a really rough year for me in a lot of different ways. Things that I don't want to talk about on here. Truth is probably one of them. I think that no one tells their side of the story and makes themselves look bad. And I had some experiences where I just thought, I don't think everyone is aware of what I'm being told and in reference to what they're being told. And for the first time last night, I actually prayed in a long time. Yeah. And I kind of asked for like forgiveness, and I asked for, is it the serenity prayer? It says, God, grant me the forgiveness, or grant me the serenity to understand the things that I can't change,
and the
wisdom to know the difference. It's like there's two different things, and then the wisdom to know the difference, right? And you had said something earlier that just kind of triggered that. And when you said truth, I was like, oh, these are all like really hitting, like they're kind of hitting me, because last night when I did that, I just thought like I did ask for forgiveness for some things. And I also recognize that I'm a human, and I've always been the person that I do care about how other people feel and how I make other people feel, to your tune of being a people pleaser. But I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like done trying to please people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I'm in this position where I'm like, I want to hear both sides. I don't want to sit here and debate with someone. I don't want to sit across from someone and say, I voted for Harris, this is why, and then have them come for me. That's not what I'm looking for, because that doesn't solve anything. That doesn't bring us together. That actually causes more of a divide. Right. There's a famous photo from, I want to say from the 60s, where the hippie puts the daisy in the gun end of the rifle. Uh-huh. And I do very much see myself as a bit of a hippie, where I literally just want peace, not to avoid the conversations, but I want peace in a way that it's like, it's fascinating to me that people can have their perspectives and their understandings of a situation. Two people could stand next to each other, right? You were standing right next to the media and they portrayed this whole thing, and you were standing there and you're like, but we know what happened. Just say what happened. And whether that's like a journalistic...
They might have been told by the people back home, like, you can't say that yet until we have it verified and verified and verified. I don't know.
Yes, to draw it out, or to bring out to make it a story, to be able to have more to add on to. Yes, correct. So what if we, right, as a society, when things come out, instead of immediately reacting and seeing something, like seeing a headline or seeing something, instead like looking at it again, like you even said that with your book, right? That I love the fact that your book kind of goes from, it's like it's like a flashback, right, to the history, and then it comes back to like a present day time, or for the time period that they're in, right, the 20s, right? So you're going sort of back and forth, and how it might be a book that people might need to like sort of reread different sections. We do that with movies. You watch a movie and you're like, I don't know if I really got that, and then you watch it again, and the second time you're like, oh, okay. I don't know what that is. Brain chemistry, life experiences, things that we, a lot of us have experienced things that maybe we never want to experience again. So there's some part of our brain that protects us from those certain things. We're just humans, and we all are so different in that. I'm not saying that you should not be angry or frustrated or sad or discouraged or excited or, hopeful. But where do we get to a place where we're like not rubbing it in each other's faces and being obnoxious? Like that's the part that I'm like, can we just not do that? Because
can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So there's a saying for married couples, like, would you rather be right or married? And of course the answer is like, I'd rather be married. If I'm going to be right, we'll probably end up getting divorced. And I feel like this is an opportunity in our culture because of what's happened. And the drama around it, that the media also maybe getting the wind knocked out of their sails a little bit and realizing people like podcasters are stealing their thunder by having more real conversations. It's an opportunity, I think, to get back to what our country was founded on, what are the common things that used to make us proud to be Americans, and how we can pull together on that. And for me, it's not would you rather be right or be married, it's rather would you rather be right or be in relationship, period. There's family members of mine that are completely on their side and they want to cut off their relationship because of politics. And I'm like, why do you need to be right? Why can't we be in relationship and accept that we both are going to someday stand before God and find out really where we were right or wrong? So it excites me. Like when I look at the Constitution, and I've taught it and read it many times, I see that the fundamental things that the government is supposed to do is, protect us from foreign enemies, to help regulate the money. So there's only one money system, so it won't be confusing, the mail, and to allow families to flourish and grow and to make their way without hindering them unnecessarily with overdue regulations. Those are the basic things in there. But we've gotten so far astray from that. In fact, I was reading that at one point in 1930, it was only like 12% of the money was for the federal government, and now it's over 50%. It's passing that. So we are, I think, way overregulated. And then when you have so much money flooding through the government, people that are not connected to their community, I did finally meet Mike Kelly, and that was the first representative on the federal level I've ever met. And I was like, how come it's so hard to meet someone that's supposed to be representing you? They don't know me, and I don't know how to have a voice to them. I mean, there's internet, there's people that can do that, but no one's teaching our young people, like, if you want to connect with what's happening on the federal level, you've got to do this and this and this. It's not being taught to them. So my point is, I think we're overregulated because those who are spending too much time in Washington are out of touch with what their community actually wants and needs and the way they think. Now, because I was raised in Northern Virginia, right by Washington, D.C., I do have a sense that there is kind of a civil war between large metropolitan cities and more rural places like here. We think very differently when you live outside of a major metropolis. Would you agree?
Well, because I've lived in major metropolises, and I think that a lot of people, and I'm trying to think of how I can word this respectfully, right? And we talked a little bit about faith and religion, and I've talked to you about how mine has shifted, I didn't go to church on Christmas. I haven't gone to church in a very long time. And that's not something I'm ready to get into to defend necessarily. It's not that I don't know how to say this. I take people for where they are and for who they are and what they believe. And I've met people of many different religions in my lifetime. I actually dated a Jewish man when I lived in New York City. I have many Jewish friends. I have friends who consider themselves to be like Hindu. And what I've recognized in all of these different religions is that they all have these very deep rooted beliefs, right? And all of them come from a place of just being good, being a good person. Like at the root of it, it's being a good person. And for me, I think moving back here, I feel sometimes as if I'm not a Christian, then I must not be a good person. And that's a little disheartening to me because I grew up going to church, right? I grew up going to church. My dad was a deacon. I mean, I had to sit in church from a very young age. I wasn't going back to the Sunday school during church. When I was itty bitty, I was dressed and I was sitting in church. And they would usually bring me a coloring book or something, and I would, but I was quiet. I listened. I sang. I went through communion. I learned to understand what communion meant. I wasn't allowed to do communion before I understood what it meant. And I remember my brother one time when we were up at the old Mount Chestnut on 422. It's now, the building's still there, that red brick building.
Chiropractor or something.
Yeah, right? But every time I see it, I'm like, that was our church. Yeah. But I remember seeing the pew, and I remember my brother looking back at me when they were handing the little wine, I wanted the grape juice, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't understand what it meant. And my parents really instilled that in me, and I respected that. And still, I mean, when I go to my mom's house now, we pray. We pray before meals, and I respect that. But my perspective has changed because of a lot of things that have happened in my lifetime. Yeah. It's not to say I don't believe in God, but I'm not a bad person because of that. And I'm not saying that everybody has made me feel that way. I don't want to be forced to believe something just because someone else believes it. I think that we all should be able to really believe what we believe, because that's our truth, right? And to be respectful of one another. I mean, I went to a friend's house not too long ago, very religious, her whole family. And her grandfather, we were hanging out in the pool. We got out of the pool, we put our towels on, we had our little sweatshirts or whatever, and her grandfather went over and met her grandfather. And then he just out of nowhere, he's like, would it be okay if I prayed with you girls? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he prayed with us. And then we went inside. She's like, I'm so sorry if that made you feel uncomfortable. I said, it didn't make me feel uncomfortable because I am open to learning what other people, why other people feel the way they feel and what they believe. And
I would love to speak into that a little bit too.
Yeah. I want to.
So first off, I do want to clarify that I think not every religion is just about being a good person. That's the facade. I think the main difference I found in my faith, which is a Christian faith, is recognizing that I'm not a good person, that I needed salvation, and that Christianity is the only faith where God reached down to us. He humbled himself to come to us. So it's very different if you look at those blanket things. There's no opportunity to earn your salvation in the true Christian, what the Bible teaches. It's all by grace. So there are Christians who are very prideful, and I'm sad for them because the fundamental truth, I think, of what the Christian gospel is that you need to be humble enough to admit your own sin and your own fault and realize that you'll never be good enough. So there's a difference in that. I also want to mention, you talked about how every book has, they paint their own story really well. Well, if you ever read the Bible, and I'm not saying go read it cover to cover, although I have read it several times. It is phenomenal in that there are horrible things that people did that were supposed to be God's people. And it doesn't take long to go, if this is a fake book, they would have edited all that out. This must be actually something true because it's not like any other book that's not glorifying and that's showing the underbelly of many humans and their failings and their weaknesses in order to establish really this whole big 4,000-year narrative that gets to the point that we needed Jesus to come. So it's very different in that way too. And I guess with that having said, I hope this is taken right, but I wouldn't want anyone to have to think the way I think. And I'm not going to try to persuade you or my family members or anyone to think what I think. But would I want everyone to find what I've found? Yeah. And I find that the Bible teaching is the freest document. It's the most liberating thing. I tell people, I think the most liberating thing is the Bible, and the second most liberating document in all of human history, I think, is our Constitution. And so those are the two things that I look for. Who's going to uphold the rights to us having the freedom to read and exercise those things?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And thank you for just being so honest with me. This is what I wanted. When I say good, I mean, it's that grace, right? It's having this practice that you believe in and that you know that you're doing everything you can to be the best version of yourself. I sort of go into these best versions of myself, but I think I have come across some people that they're like, well, this is the only way. And I'm like, but I don't feel like it is. Yeah. I just don't, based off of the experiences I've had in my life. I've had very spiritual experiences. I think losing my father was the moment for me when things shifted dramatically. I think living all over the country. And I've seen some evil for sure. When I was on my bike trip, I had a really interesting experience. We were hosted by the Hopi Cultural Center, which is in Arizona. It's just sort of like southwest of the Four Corners. So Four Corners is, if you look, and I don't want to mess these states up.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but
you know what I'm talking about. But
yeah.
It's like Arizona, Colorado. I think it's New Mexico, and Utah, maybe. Or wait, no,
Nevada.
It's
Nevada. I think I could be wrong, but we'll go with the Four Corners.
Four Corners. So I'm not. Yeah. I'm like geography crap.
Yeah. Yeah,
but the Four Corners, and that's a very predominantly Native American area. There's a lot of different Native American tribes there. I met Hopis on my trip. I met some Navajos in Flagstaff that actually did a corn pollen ceremony on my bike, which is a blessing for protection and safety on the road ahead. And I think that they approached me because they felt that I was open to that. They also saw we had a van and it had magnets on it, and they saw what I was doing. And it was just a really beautiful experience. They were there teaching culture to the high school students about who they are, just teaching, right? When we went to the Hopi Cultural Center, it was a little scarier because it was really in the middle of nowhere, but it was beautiful. I'll never forget, we had stopped at one point and there was this overpass, and I got out. I stopped, and the girl that was driving the van got out, and she came over to me, and she just had tears streaming down her face. She's like, "This is so beautiful." And she said, "I grew up in Southern California in LA. I haven't seen the United States this way. I haven't seen it this way. And I never imagined that I could see something like this. This is just, thank you for asking me to be." It was just a really beautiful moment between us. When we were in Flagstaff, they actually gave me a Dreamcatcher necklace, and they gave her Dreamcatcher earrings. Just met a lot of really amazing people. But when we were at the Hopi Cultural Center, we met these guys outside who were making these little like woven bowls. I still have it. It's this little tiny thing that you could put jewelry or something in. And he gave us some bear root, and we were like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Well, it's something that we use to sort of protect ourselves from negative energy. So it's like this, it looks like a branch, it looks like a little tiny twig." And he said, "You chew it up, and then you kind of spit into your hand, and then you sort of do this with your hands, and you like protecting your energy." He said, "I'm giving this to you because there's a lot of negative energy on the road ahead, and you're going to need it." And I didn't really think too much of it. We were just like, "Oh, okay." They give us this little medallion thing that was like for protection too. And I kept meeting these people that were protecting me. It was wild. And we got to a gas station. I would typically, when I started out my day, I would go about 35 miles, and then I would stop, and I'd usually eat a second breakfast and rehydrate and do stuff like that. And, sometimes put more sunscreen on if it was still like, I started in August. And we get to this gas station. I'll never forget. And she pulled up the van to get gas and use the restroom, whatever. And I was standing right next to the tailpipe with my bike, and I was checking my bike tire. And I leaned over, and a truck kind of pulled up behind me to pull in the thing next to. And there was all this space. There was plenty of space for him. But for whatever reason, he was like annoyed, and he laid on his horn. And it kind of jolted me for a second. And I stood up, and I just stood up, and I kind of went, "Yeah, go ahead." I was like, "Oh, go ahead." And he pulled up, and when I leaned forward again, he revved his engine really loudly twice, and the tailpipe was right there. And when he did it, it felt like instantaneously he sucked all the joy and the motivation I had that day. It, like in an instant, it came out of my body, and I just started sobbing, like uncontrollably sobbing. And I couldn't compose myself. And I felt this really negative energy, like just this angry, whatever it was. It was the weirdest thing. And my friend was like, "Quick, grab the bear root," and we did it. And then we kind of did, and then we started laughing, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm okay because you're here." Mm-hmm. That was like,
I don't know if the guy was a hater or flirting with you or just trying to get a reaction, but I do think hate is evil, and it's from an evil place.
No, there is definitely evil.
And
yeah.
Yeah. Back to like some of what you're saying is I really think that people are blessed to the extent that they do adhere to the way God designed them to be. With like the 10 Commandments is, you don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat, don't like, and if you try to adhere to some of those things, you will have a good life. You're a good person, and certainly I understand when you say good person, we're not talking universally flawless. We're just talking about trying to do your best. But I do think that people fall into the gap, even Christians that misunderstand it fall into the gap that they have to be good enough, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I have so much respect for you, especially just, it's like owning it. I've had so many people who come in here and they talk about God and they talk about Jesus, and I can tell that that's like what they truly believe in their hearts, right? And I'm not saying that I don't, right? But I also believe in a lot of different other things.
Yeah, we have a lot in common in our worldview. And I was, you know, when you're talking about how worldview shapes the dialogue, especially with politics today, you can strip it down and go, well, if you believe that there is no God and everything's evolution, then really the ideas of bullying or take what you want or like there's no consequences for that. So we can't come to a common understanding of morality. Now, people, as soon as they cross from that to saying there is a God, I just don't really know him, or maybe he's not knowable, or maybe I know him in a different way than you, we have so much more in common. But yet there's a lot of things that are different too, especially in terms of like your moral framework. But even that, you know, universally there's been lots written about how they'll go to a country that never was evangelized by Christians, but they have some of the same things in place as far as their moral code, their family unit. And the Bible talks about that in Ecclesiastes 3, and I think in Romans 1, it says, you know, we're without excuse because God put these things in our hearts. So there's so much that as soon as you're kind of open to a God who is personal, who is guiding you, we have so much we can have a conversation about there. Mm-hmm. But the schism, I'm not saying it's Democrat, Republican at all, because I know great people on both sides with different religions, but I do think it's shaped a lot of the dialogue the last few years that many conservative Christians align themselves with Trump for moral reasons that they thought were moral, and other sides are like, that's not moral to my morality. And so it becomes this discussion that what are you basing that on? You know, what is your worldview? And I don't, again, I don't really think we should get into all of the specific debates right now, but just acknowledging that the worldview plays a big part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It absolutely does. And I just think it's like peeling an onion. I mean, and I just don't feel like the onion ends. Yeah. I just think there's a continuously layers and layers and layers that we're unpeeling. And for me, there's like sort of this anxious feeling of, I have a lot of people that probably want me to, well, say this and say that. And you don't, it's so aggressive. And I don't feel like that's necessary. I don't feel like it's just starting the conversation. And how is it that for the next election, if we have another female running, because I don't know, there's something in me. I kind of want to see I want to have a woman as a president in this country because I am a woman and I am a very stubborn woman in a lot of ways where why can't I be the CEO? Why can't I? And I do feel that there are a lot of people who still live by man goes to work and does this and a woman stays home and does this. Yeah. And I'm like, but you don't have to just be one thing in this lifetime. No. You know, my cousin, they made that choice. They made the decision. Her and her husband worked very hard so she could stay home when her girls were born. And they knew at a certain point, once they reached a certain age, she would go back to work. And I commend her for that. I commend her for taking that choice. I never look down on a woman who is a stay-at-home mom who does all that. I don't look down on women that do that. That is their choice. They should have that choice. But just as I should have the choice to not do certain things. A lot of people, it's
great conversations to have before you marry someone to know where you both stand on that for sure. You know, my husband and I homeschooling hadn't really been in our conversation. He wasn't real supportive of that. And what happened was but we had the conversation of, I said to him, well, I want you to be the primary provider. And he looked at me and he said, that is a lot of pressure. I want you to see God as our provider, and I will do my best to do what I can to allow you to do what God's, telling you to do. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted to stay home in the most formative years, but I had gotten a teaching degree. I thought I would go back to teaching and be a part of the school system the whole time my kids were in it. And then instead we had this sharp left turn when our daughter went to kindergarten in Tennessee, and it was a full day kindergarten. And I had 3 little kids at home. I couldn't be that room mom. I couldn't be there. I couldn't know what was going on. And at the end of the day, every day we'd say, what did you learn today, honey? And she'd be like, I don't know. And what was fun? Recess. What was bad? Standing in line. And it was like, we have no idea what she's doing for 8 hours a day, what she's being taught. And so when I chose to try the next year to bring her home, the transformation in our home was instant. That I had this little baby. She could help run and get the bottle. She could help, she was involved with her younger siblings, and their camaraderie was amazing and beautiful. And we can do all the school you need to do before noon, really. Get up at 7, you're few hours of English, a little bit of math, a little bit of, prayer, Bible, add some fun, creative, sciencey stuff. You're done by lunch, and then you have all day to be as family. So when I started to see that, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And I will say, we are not rich, and we went through some very, very, very lean years, but God always provided for me to be able to stay as long as that was in my heart to do so. And I'm just so grateful because not that my kids are perfect at all, but they get along, and we have a mutual respect and love for each other. And I think they're going to be okay. And part of that is the way that I taught them. And I hope you, even though we're kind of in a bubble with homeschoolers, it's largely a conservative Christian movement, not exclusively, but around here it tends to be. Our curriculum taught, we taught other religions. We're like, this is what other people believe. This is what we parents believe, and you need to be able to have conversations about what you're going to choose someday. And I've said openly to my kids, look, whatever you end up doing, don't shut the door to me, because I have your back. I love you. I will always love you. I hope that we always have that in our life. And sure, it's easier when you go in the same direction, religious and politically, but they hopefully will not be the cancel culture kids that I've seen happen with a lot of others, where if they start to think differently politically, suddenly they can't talk to their parents anymore, ever. I mean, it's just brutal what's been happening.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I've never talked to someone who has homeschooled their children before.
Oh, really? I could talk about that all day.
I mean, I know plenty of people who have. I just did a Christmas show, and there were some kids in the show that they're homeschooled. Didn't think anything of it. Didn't judge it. Didn't look down on it. Didn't. That's the conversation that I want to have.
It's ironic that now I'm on the school board, and as you know, in Butler.
Yeah.
When I decided to go to the school board, I said to them, look, I have a teaching degree. I taught public school for just 2 years. I was an educator in lots of other venues, but I've been teaching every grade, every subject for 15 years. And I can speak to why people choose to homeschool and what might make them want to not homeschool if you want them back in the public schools. And so they actually chose me, which was kind of astounding. And I feel like I have a voice in that. I always told my kids I don't want us to be afraid of public school. So I actually had them take a class in Butler. In the past, you could take, I think, a fourth of the school day, or like 2 classes. So my kids took things like Spanish and band and orchestra and architecture, things like that. They would drop them in for a couple hours. And then there were times we needed it because of finances or other things that my kids went in for a few years. And now my youngest 2 are all in for these few last years.
Yeah. But it's just such an interesting perspective that you just gave, and how it almost cultivated this really strong family unit.
Oh, yeah.
And
you'll find that among homeschoolers generally.
But it's, to me, and this might be an ignorant thing that I'm about to say, but to me, some things are very simple, right? And it was your choice to do that, and you made that choice, and that's just it, right? You made it for many different reasons. And it's like, okay, let's just let people live and let live. I think when I say these things, sometimes I'm like, maybe that makes me sound very naive, but why can't it be that simple?
Yeah. I take very seriously that that ultimately your kid's education is your responsibility. Even if you use the school system from preschool on up, and I actually read something before I got into homeschooling. It was like, if your kids are in public school, you should be the kind of present parent who knows what they're reading, who knows what their teachers' names are, who knows what they're doing. In this day and age, especially after COVID, that's almost impossible to do. You can't get your foot in the door. They don't want parents coming into the classroom in the high school level. You can't even know what they're reading unless you're going after the teachers through emails. There isn't any parent-teacher meeting. So it's really hard to be an in-tuned parent in public school. In private school, maybe a little more so, but you also have less resources, and you might be pulled more financially, and there's less, help if you have kids with special needs, things like that in a lot of these schools. So homeschooling isn't necessarily harder, other than really financially. It's a huge sacrifice financially to give up the whole income and to commit to those years. I look back and, people that I knew that were stayed in teaching all these years, it's really been 20 some years that I missed having a career, which is why this book, spinning back to it, is kind of a fun thing that I didn't really anticipate. I wasn't someone who said this is going to happen in my future. And I don't know that it will be a career. I mean, that's kind of presumptuous to think it'll go anywhere. And I'm definitely not doing it for my own glorification. I really just want to help Butler. But my husband said to me, oh, you could write about this town or that town. And I said, you know what, if I do this again, it'll be about a town that needs a boost. Like, I want to do something that's needed and not necessarily just, you know, honestly, I have nothing against Zealy and Opal. I think they're great, but they don't need a book like this. They're doing great. So I'd love to find, if I did it somewhere else, a town that really needs a boost, a shot in the arm, and say, you know, I can dig up the gems in your town that might make people want to come there too. So that is something I see in my future that I get excited about. I also don't know if I have it in me to turn this into a screenplay, but I'm going to try, because if this could turn into a movie that would bring people and revenue and interest to Butler, it's funny how visual people are. They want to go places they've seen in a movie. Then that would be fun. That'd be great. And I'd insist it be filmed in Butler, be really genuine. Because I know we've had other books that were set in Butler, but I don't know if any that was really filmed here that was about Butler.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're going to change the way that you said that. You said it that you hope to turn this into a screenplay. That's just what you're going to do.
I bought the software.
You're going to, okay. So you're going to.
If I can see it through, yeah, we'll see.
You will.
Okay.
You will.
Yeah.
You just will.
Because I know theater people like you that can come back and go, okay, that's not how it works. You need to refine this.
I mean, I can get you a stage manager, probably a producer, probably, costumers, all the people to do the history of.
Well, I'll write it and then pass it on to someone else to.
But you're going to have to be there to oversee everything and approve everything, because
That'd
that's
be
how
fun.
that works. So I really loved our conversation. I think, you and I could probably sit down a million more times and go so much deeper. And I just really appreciate you being willing to talk to me. And I'm really excited to read this, because I love, when you said about the relationship, putting a relationship in there, that wasn't something that you were going to do at first, but human connection is really important. And it does sort of, it makes these characters real. Mm-hmm. It makes them real people. And even though they're sort of based off of different things that you've pulled from your life, it's people can relate to something like that. So I'm really proud of you, and I'm really proud to know you and just have you here today. And so Sacred Stones, a Butler book by Cecilia Overby Tomko. You can get this on Amazon, right? You can also buy the book on Audible. If anyone that's listening right now is a bookstore owner or a librarian, and there's ways to sort of please reach out to me. I'll put you in contact with Cecilia. I think we need to get your book in every bookstore in Butler County. I just really think that needs to be a goal.
Thank you.
I think you should add that to your list of whatever else you probably have going on in your life. I'm going to make you add a task that
I will be glad to
I
do
implore
that.
you to look into the bookstores. There's a really cute little, it's the little green bookstore, I think, in Zilly.
Zilly, yeah. I need to call her back. I left some.
She's wonderful. Yeah, I know them. They're wonderful. Set up some book signings, set up some readings, we should set something up, I mean,
yeah,
you should talk to Hobnob and see if they'd, want to do a thing one night and let you, even the Butler Little Theater, who knows? Who knows? Yeah. There's so many opportunities.
Well, I appreciate you being in my corner for that.
Yeah.
And I want to say that on Amazon, if you put in Sacred Stones, it won't find this book. It's 47 pages of things related to gems and stones. Mm-hmm. So put in just Cecilia Tomko and you'll get it right up. It's the only thing I have on there.
Okay.
Hopefully that'll change, I guess, as things get bought, they go higher up. I'm really excited about doing right now, which is why I've kind of put the movie script on hold, which is making these little promo videos. And they are promos for my book, but more importantly, they're things that I think people could shoot out beyond who's going to read the book right now to other people about Butler. So I'm going around. I did one at Preston Park.
I just watched that one.
At the Bantam area. I did one for the Pullman building. So I'm having a lot of fun doing this. And I'm trying to keep them less than 2 minutes. I was told 1 minute, but it's hard to keep under 1 minute. So they're out there on YouTube, and
you have to talk faster than you talk.
Yeah. What's my YouTube name? I think it's CC Butler probably, or something like that.
Okay.
But that's something that's very shareable, totally free, and could educate people about the wonderful things in Butler as well in a short format.
Well, thank you. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to get to know Andrew and Caroline and just sort of in the hidden mysteries of the Varga family, but also all of the history behind Butler.
Yeah. I did point out to you in the back of the book, there's a list of the true events in Butler.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of put it in the back on purpose. I wanted people to read the book, maybe wondering what's true, what's not true. But if you're one of those people that you have to know, just flip to the back and you can see.
Yeah, page 192 and 193.
Yeah.
And also breaks down the illustration. So for each chapter, there's an illustration that we did talk about. And then all the resources are on that next page. But
I really wanted to put a plug in for people like Bill May and the Tourism Society. And so hopefully people outside of Butler could find those links and learn more about what's going on here in Butler.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. So it's a great town. So when someone asks you, why did you move back to Butler? I'm going to say, why not?
There's no better place to be, right?
It's, I'm starting to realize that.
Not because we're better, but because when it's home and you put your roots down, that's way better than I don't envy Hayes Perkins. I know when you bounce around the globe too much, nothing feels like home. And then you're missing out on one of the sweetest things of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told you yesterday that because my parents were immigrants and most of the places I lived, I always knew they were temporary. When we bought our house in Butler, I remember feeling like this is the first time I really am home. Mm-hmm. So I probably will stay. I don't know. Maybe I'll be one of those people who eventually wants to live where it's warmer, but especially on a day like today with several inches of snow.
Yes.
But it's beautiful. So
it is beautiful.
And Butler is really good with family. I mean, I've never seen dedicated family like here. People are so bonded to their family. And when you live in major metropolitan areas, usually your close friends are people whose family are very far away. And that's why you start to connect with them, which is fun and different.
Yeah.
But it's a very different, like I said, city versus country. It's a very different mentality on many levels. And one of them is that family connection.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited. Again, I'm going to say it again to read this book, but I don't know for just what our conversation will do for people. Let's see what it opens up.
Well, it's great to get to know you, Laura, and I'd be glad to come back. I have to finish that other book, so I have another.
Yeah, once you finish the other book, maybe this time next year, we'll just starting the year off with Cecilia. But thank you again. I really appreciate your time and just for being so open and vulnerable with me as well. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode, and be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.